Okay, welcome. Hi, y'all. We're excited to have you here. We want to welcome you to Flatiron School's New Year, New Tech Career event. My name is Corey Mickelson, and I am the Marketing Events Coordinator here at Flatiron School. A big part of my job is hosting free introductory events focused on hot topics within the tech industry, along with panel events like these, where we get to hear a little more from tech professionals within the industry. Quick reminder for tonight's event, we will be saving all of our questions until the end of the event for the Q&A portion, but feel free to drop them in the Q&A as they come up. We will also be using the chat to drop links, so make sure you see that little blue button at the bottom of your chat. Switch it from panelist and host to everyone. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our host for the evening, Jaslyn Ferguson. Go ahead and take it away, Jaslyn.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Corey. As Corey said, my name is Jaslyn, and I work on the marketing team at Flatiron School. Today, I am joined by a lovely set of guests, and the purpose of this discussion will be to really dig deep into why choose a career in tech, how to get started, how each of these individuals got started, and really focused on as we enter, well, we've already entered, as we continue to go further and further into this new year, to really think about how a career in tech just might be that perfect career for you to help align with your goals that you have set out for the new year and beyond. So with all of that said, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves with your current role, the company, and just kind of basically what you do. Jesse, we'll start with you.
Hey, I'm Jesse. I'm currently a backend developer intern at Shopify. Shopify builds e-commerce platforms and tools for entrepreneurs.
Nice. Allie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Allie. I currently work at ZocDoc, which is a health tech company based in New York City, as a diversity technical sourcer. So what I do is really make sure that whoever we interview for our technical roles, our pipeline is diverse. We interview women, we interview people of color. I'm also the founder and CEO of a career community called Baddies in Tech. Our mission is to advance the careers of Black and Brown women in the tech industry through education and empowerment. That's me.
Awesome. And Chloe.
Hi, my name is Chloe Weatherly. I am a freelance product designer and accessibility advocate based out of Los Angeles, California. I really enjoy doing freelance because I'm getting to work on about 17 different projects right now, and they're all very exciting, and help people to fulfill their dreams by helping them build websites and apps and various interfaces.
Nice. Well, I do have to point out the fact that we do have one Flatiron School alum here on the panel, which is Jesse. So I want to start with you, Jesse, and just kind of ask you, as a graduate of Flatiron School's bootcamp program, what were you doing before you enrolled, and what kind of led you on the path to decide that you wanted a career in tech?
Yeah, so I actually have bachelor's degrees in fine art and German literature and language. When I graduated, I really didn't have a plan. Like when I was in college, my plan was just to graduate, and I figured everything would fall into place. So when I left, I was doing like unpaid internships at art museums, and I was doing landscaping and just kind of random gigs. I was playing with the idea of going to grad school for art, but nothing like really felt like it was really pulling me in any direction. And then there's actually a weekly coding meetup in St. Louis that a friend told me about like a year after I graduated college. And like, even after 5 years of undergrad, I missed school. Like after a year being out, I was like, I missed learning something. And I joined that weekly meetup because I was like, maybe I could use tech to like enhance my art career, my art practice. But at the end of the program, I really didn't feel like I had the skills to like use coding or anything like that in my art, or to really enter a career in tech, because I wasn't really focused. And I think I wasn't focused because I wasn't really at my breaking point yet. I was just kind of doing it to like learn something. So after that, I was kind of learning some things on my own, like JavaScript and stuff like that, and just like seeing other people gradually enter the tech field. So yeah, the breaking point was really when I got a customer service job in tech, and I, was kind of adjacent to like engineers and people at the company, but I hated doing customer service. And that's when my mentor actually sent me a link for a scholarship for Flatiron School. And I applied and got in, and then, yeah, and now I'm here.
Awesome. And so you and I have talked a bit, Jesse, so obviously I know a little bit of your backstory, but you, after getting the training that you had, you went into doing freelance, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that and kind of what that looked like as somebody who's new to tech, and then, not necessarily going the route of working for a company, but deciding to kind of branch out as a freelancer.
Mhm. Yeah, so I did the part-time software engineering course at the Flatiron School. And I finished that in May of 2021. And I was working full-time through the whole time I was at Flatiron, which was not easy. And the whole time I kept thinking like I should just quit my full-time job, but I needed health insurance and all that stuff. So as I got close to the end of Flatiron, I kind of started taking on freelance jobs, and it got to a point where I had so much work that I was going to have to turn jobs down because I was like, I work full time too. So I kind of was like, I'm doing this customer service job, and I feel like I need to focus full time on coding. Otherwise, I don't know, I might just be like stuck in this loop. So I ended up quitting my job pretty much at the same time I graduated from Flatiron, and spent most of last year just freelancing, which was super cool. But I think in the end, it didn't work out for me. I think like the skills that I gained at Flatiron allowed me to like feel confident doing that. But I think from a personal standpoint, I wanted something with like more structure. I think at a certain point, you have to take that jump when you're working full time if you want to go into freelance. Like that is a big decision to quit. And then I think it's also a big decision to like self-reflect and realize like when something's not working out for you. So that's how that I got to a point like that when I was freelancing, where I'm like, I don't really think this is like the arena where I can grow the most, and kind of really take my career to the next level. So yeah, that's when I started applying to full-time roles.
Gotcha. Speaking of freelance, right? Everybody's path is different, and that's why I love having conversations like this and having panel conversations like this, because while you realized, okay, you did freelance, and now you have, gone on to work for a company, feeling like that's a better fit for you. With Chloe, on the other hand, you are doing freelance right now in the design space. Tell us a little bit about what led you to where you are, and what made you decide to, go the route of being a product designer.
So I actually entered sort of the graphic design, digital design industry when I was 14. And I don't want to date myself, but I'm going to be 35 in a couple of months. So like I was doing this a while. I actually went to art school when I was 17 to like a commercial art school to study graphic design, and didn't find that to be a particularly rewarding experience. And actually my favorite professor at the university that I attended encouraged me to go to a four-year college and attain a bachelor's degree, which I did. It's something completely unrelated to design. My undergrad is in gender studies and Middle Eastern studies, with a focus on literature. It's extremely useful in the real world. So as I was doing that, though, I actually was getting more and more graphic design jobs. I worked for a number of nonprofits. I worked for a United States senator. I worked on the Obama campaign, like had a lot of opportunities to do design work. throughout the course of not pursuing that in my studies. And after graduation, I transitioned into working in education for a number of nonprofits. I ran after school programs, spent a lot of time with a lot of little kids. was a preschool teacher for a while. And that eventually, for many people, runs its course because it's a very demanding job. And the payoff from the kiddos is great, but it's not sustainable for everyone. So I transitioned out of that. Some things in my life happened, and I was able to make a big life change. And I actually moved to Melbourne, Australia.
Oh, wow.
And I once I got there, I was kind of like, okay, what do I do? I only have like a 2-year visa. What should I do sort of with my life? And I ended up enrolling in a different boot camp, whose name I will not say. I'm not gonna like buzz market somebody else. I attended a UX intensive course.
But you went to a boot camp program.
I went to a boot camp program
Yes.
in Australia. And it really reignited my love for doing design in general, especially design with a much more consideration, the focus on the importance of the user and their needs, their access needs, things like that. And so then I ended up going to grad school and got a master's degree in communication design. And I graduated in December of 2019 with that degree. And then I moved to LA a couple months later. And then, I don't know, so like something happened, and I don't really know, something happened in the world in early 2020 and kind of stepped up my plans. But I've been very fortunate in having the network that I do, that I've been able to just sort of take on a lot of really fun creative projects, help people launch, their small businesses, been able to help people, start offering digital services that they weren't able to offer before and are desperately needed during this time. And I feel like right now, that's the thing that gives me the greatest satisfaction in the work that I'm doing, is that I'm able to help people help people.
Nice. I love that. And then speaking of helping people, Allie, I know your path to the role that you currently have is a little bit interesting as well, because you as well went to college, but for something different, but now you find yourself this tech advocate. Tell us about what's kind of led you here.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely been a journey, and it hasn't been like a straight path at all. But so my journey into tech, I graduated in 2018 with a BS in biology. So that was like definitely different than what I do now. But I think my whole career has had like a healthcare tinge to it. I've always worked at like health tech startups and stuff like that. So I guess that's where my degree comes in. But I graduated, didn't want to go to medical school, and as like an immigrant and an African kid, that was like a big no-no with like my parents and my community. But I just kind of stuck to my guns and what I wanted for my career. And I had started learning about the tech industry and kind of like what the applications of technology were in like the healthcare space and like the implications of it. And during my undergrad, I had also worked in an emergency department for 2 years. So I had worked on like EMR software and like had hands-on experience kind of like working with that type of software. So I figured like, okay, well, I don't have any experience in tech, but I do have experience with this software, and like that's tech. And so I'm sure there's companies who build that. So like, maybe let me look at, working at those companies to get my foot in the door. So it was really driven by like not wanting to go back home after graduating.
Yeah.
So yeah, my first job in tech, I ended up landing a role at a health tech startup doing implementation. So I was like traveling across like the country. I went to Beverly Hills, I went to Alaska, I went to all these different places, just like implementing the technology, working with the customers, the users, which were like doctors and nurse practitioners and things like that. And that was a really fun first job. And then I quit all of a sudden just because I was young and I wanted to build a startup. So, and I also wanted to go back home to Ghana. I'm originally from Ghana. So quit, went to Ghana for a year for a tech entrepreneurship program called MEST. And that was like really like an incubator where there were in my cohort, there were like 50 entrepreneurs from all over Africa. I was actually the only one from the United States, or like that had come from the United States. That was an interesting experience, but really like looking at problems and forming teams, forming startup teams, and like building technology to solve those problems. And that was really my intro into like kind of the software development lifecycle and all the inputs that go into like building a startup and a product to solve like a user problem. So that was really interesting. That was like my knowledge base for tech in general. And actually prior to that, I had started Baddies in Tech. So, and that was really like, that was, during my first tech job. And that was really because I was looking for a network and I was looking for people who looked like me in the tech industry. This was back in 2018, well, I started Baddies in Tech in 2019, but when my career started, like there wasn't a lot of advocacy for like Black women in tech. It wasn't spoken about a lot. And I was just looking for like other people. I looked around and I was like, where are all the Black girls at? Right. And it was just, I mean, I had grown up in like predominantly white spaces. I went to a PWI, I went to Syracuse University, but I think the tech industry for me was like a stark contrast to like all of that. And so, I was like the only Black person at that startup. So it was like very much a shock for me. And so I started the platform really just to like speak about my experiences and see if other people had similar experiences. And yeah, for some reason, people kind of like saw it as like a lot of people resonated with it, but people also kind of saw us as like experts. And I'm like, no, not really, because I just started my career 1 year ago and I don't have a background in tech. So it was interesting because I kind of like Baddies in Tech has definitely been like my thing that I'm building, but also something that's teaching me along the way.
Nice.
But yeah, and so, did that, went to Ghana, graduated from that program, stayed in Ghana for a little bit longer, and was kind of just like applying the things I learned in the program to building Baddies in Tech as more of like an organization and a business. And then was doing like technical recruitment, technical sourcing. This was when, the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd had happened in the States, and I was still in Ghana for all of this, but employers started reaching out to us, asking because I think at that time people were like, companies were under fire for like just not being diverse. And like people had finally started talking about this thing that I had noticed, a year and a half, 2 years prior. But yeah, people started reaching out to us, looking to see if we could help them find Black women in engineering, Black women in different facets of the tech space. And that's how I started sourcing and like in getting into like technical recruitment. And then finally I was like, all right, I need to come back to America. And there's bills in America, so I need to get a job. And so, yeah. And so that's kind of how I then transitioned again into technical recruiting at ZocDoc. So yeah, that's my story.
Awesome. What I really like about that is, there's so much about your story that kind of ties into our overall theme, or, kind of overarching topic of conversation being that, it's a new year, right? In some conversations that I have, in a lot of conversations, sometimes I will, almost jokingly say, oh, well, this was 2020, right? Meaning this was before we were having a lot of conversations about some of the issues that we have across different industries, but specifically in tech, of diversity. And so as you talked about, right, there's, women are underrepresented, Black women are underrepresented, but, there's also other segments that are underrepresented, people of, different disabilities are underrepresented. And so even the conversation of accessibility is super huge as we enter into 2022. So I definitely want to loop you into the conversation, Chloe, to talk about, I know accessibility is really important to you. As we go into 2022, as there are people right now on this call that are looking at, is this a path that I can even, take on? Talk to us a little bit about the importance of accessibility and when it comes to a field like design and that space in tech, and kind of what you want to see moving forward in 2022, and maybe some of the projects that you've worked on, or things that you think are noteworthy that we need to pay attention to as we move into the new year.
So my interest in accessibility essentially stems from having been doing product design for a little while and then realizing that nobody gave a flying whatever about things as simple as like color blindness in call to action items. And I was like, if you're not accounting for this, what are you accounting for screen readers? Are you accounting for mobility aids?
Right.
And that sort of set me off on a path of like, this is the thing that I really care about. And as a person who has ADHD, I am a person with a disability. But it's really, so it impacts me personally to some extent, but it's more about like the fact that we live basically our entire lives online at this point. And that is even more true for, especially during the pandemic, for immunocompromised people, people with physical limitations. And accessibility is so generally thought of as being an afterthought.
Yeah.
And one of my deep passions in the world is as a designer, as a person, all around, is that I want to inspire everybody in every part of the design process to make sure that content is accessible to as many people as possible. Anyone who wants to access your platform, your content, any of that, it needs to be accessible. Because the thing is, like, we sort of think about disability in this sort of binary way, like you're disabled or you're not, right? But everybody at some point in their life will live with a disability, whether or not it's congenital one, or it's like you break your freaking leg.
Right.
And then you're disabled for a finite period of time. As we age, our eyesight and our hearing changes, we have limited mobility, people develop arthritis and all of these other sort of situations. So it's like everyone will be disabled in different degrees at some point in their life. And so we should be designing all of our products, whatever they may be, to be as accessible as possible, because it benefits everyone when we do. It's not, I think it's so often framed as being this like, oh, but like, I'm not disabled, so why should I care? And I'm like, I don't know, have you ever had to like push a stroller up some stairs in like a New York City subway? Like, have you ever had to have someone help you do that? And some people are like, no, like I've never had to do that. And other people are like, oh yeah, I know exactly what it's like to push a stroller. So accessibility is extremely important to me. And I think that it is the part of all people within the tech field.
Yeah.
I think that everyone should be educating themselves more about the importance of accessibility, and be willing to put themselves up as an accessibility advocate so that we can all do better for everyone else, especially communities that are marginalized by disability.
Yeah. So it sounds like as a whole, as a tech community, we've got work to do, right? We've got work to do when it comes to diversity, whether it be, race or ethnic background, gender, and ability as well. These are so important, right? And as we have people right now on this, attending this event, we have attendees watching right now, a lot of people are, wondering, is tech the right move for me? Should I be going into this space? And I think it's important that we acknowledge that there is definitely, space for growth and space for improvement, which is why it's so encouraging that there are programs, like Flatiron School, or some of the other boot camps where this kind of accessibility to be able to take courses in a way that isn't your traditional 4-year, path. I think it's super important that we have these conversations so that people know that, there are so many ways that you can enact change, that you can bring about, all the necessary change that we need in the world. And a lot of that can stem from or can start within, tech careers. So I want to talk about the fact that I keep hearing this buzzword, right, going around of the Great Resignation. And there's, a lot of younger individuals, whether it's Gen Z or even millennials, are, if they're not happy in their job, they're leaving, right? So you have all these employers that are like, oh no, what are we going to do? Because a lot of people are leaving. And, I personally think it's great. If you're not happy, you should find what makes you happy, and find a path that's best for you, right? So the question is, and I'm going to ask this to everyone, we'll kind of go around the room, but how can companies in the tech industry do a better job of creating pathways for career changers? Or, what can you see, maybe even speaking to your own obstacles or challenges that you had as you entered into the space? What can be done, whether it's from companies or even from, educators like boot camps, to help to make entry into this space what it needs to be, right? So, again, whether you're talking about specific companies, what companies can do, or what kind of resources that you'd like to see to kind of help to lessen the barriers that exist to get more people into these jobs. Because again, as we're seeing the Great Resignation, a lot of people are looking and a lot of people are asking, well, what's going to be the industry that's right for me? So what would you like to see happen to help kind of bring more of these people into this space, into the tech industry? And we can start with you, Jessie.
Okay. So I think one thing that's definitely has already started happening because of the pandemic is remote work. I just think back to when I graduated with my art degree and I was applying to internships and looking at all the biggest like art institutions and art museums. I was applying for things in like New York and LA and cities where like I would have to move there and do an unpaid internship. And I was like, I don't know, I don't have family out there. Like I was still going for it, but then I'm like, I don't even know how I would make this a reality. So I feel like I've always kind of been like, that's always been in the back of my head, like being in a city like St. Louis, where there are a lot of opportunities and a lot of things are happening and a lot of things are kind of like we're growing. And like you can definitely make a career here. But I also was like, well, am I going to be limited in a city that's not LA or New York or someplace that's like has a lot of art opportunities? And then when I even started thinking about tech, I'm like, well, all like the big companies, we don't have offices in St. Louis. So I would have to be moving somewhere. And it really limited kind of like, if I didn't want to move, it would limit where I could work. And so for that reason, and also like as someone who struggled a lot with anxiety and depression, the idea of like having to go into work every day into an office and like constantly being around people and people kind of like you're just always in people's eyes. So if you're having a bad day or you're not feeling well, it can be really obvious. And some people, like some environments don't really, they give any grace to that. So I think one thing, obviously, it's like the pandemic sucks.
Right.
And I was actually going to do Flatiron in person in Atlanta. And that was kind of like my big, like, I was like, I'm just going to move somewhere, make a decision. Cause I was just nothing, like I said before, nothing really was pulling me in any direction. And then I was going to start in June. And then in, I think, April, it was canceled and transferred to online. And even though I signed up for the in-person class, when it got switched to online, I was like, actually, this is a lot better because I can stay in my apartment with my roommate, be close to my family. Like I have my support system here. And yeah, so I felt like that kind of opened up that opportunity. And then as I got through the program and started realizing like a lot of companies are not going back in person, it kind of, I don't know, I just felt this like relief because I'm like, oh, this like opens up a lot of opportunities. And then one thing that I love, so I just started at Shopify like 3 weeks ago. So it's definitely like new year, new tech career vibes. But one thing that I love about them is they kind of went like full force into remote work. So they have a motto that's like digital by design. So instead of kind of like working around like how are we going to make this work, they just like wanted to build the whole company and like all their onboarding materials and everything and just say we're just going to be remote. And it also allows companies to hire talent from literally all over the world. Right. So that also kind of like what you guys were talking about with accessibility, even in terms of like you were saying, if people have disabilities and offices aren't like designed to support them, or people of lower income who like maybe live in a small town somewhere who don't have the funds to just relocate, like they still have the same opportunities as someone who lives in these big cities. So like I said, it's already like happening. But I would love to see even more and more companies just kind of like go like headfirst into that, and not really try to go back in office, or at least like a hybrid model where, if you don't want to go into office every day, like I don't feel like you should have to. So.
Yeah, I think, like you said, obviously with the pandemic, a lot of bad has happened. But, one of the things that has definitely stood out is the increase in remote work, which is something that I think has always been, traditionally appealing about a lot of, kind of tech jobs, is that there is that potential for flexibility, depending on the work that you do. And now, as you said, we're kind of entering into a space where a lot of companies, specifically tech companies, are kind of, spearheading the way there of saying, let's just make it all digital. Let's just, make it that everybody's working from home. And with that, I think there's so many efficiencies and also just so much more opportunity, like you said, for people who can't just pick up and move to the next big city to try to make it. So yeah, definitely love to see things moving in that direction. Chloe, Allie, anything else of kind of the direction that we want to see either companies move in or the industry as a whole?
Yes. So I'm going to refer back to Baddies in Tech's mission of like education and empowerment. Like I think one big blocker is just like demystifying the industry. Like I think sometimes tech can really like look like this pinnacle on a hill, and it's like, what the hell is like even is that? And like, what are my options there? Like, can I see myself there? I think especially for like Black women or minority women, it's like that representation is also missing. So I think demystifying the industry, and I think that's what like, what Baddies in Tech is here for, what like some of these other communities and organizations are trying to do. And so I think if companies can like really support that, partner with some of these organizations to amplify that, and really like support their internal, like their employees that are, part of these groups, to kind of like have that sense of belonging and just like amplify the whole thing, right? I think that'll help with that barrier. And then I think the other thing that Jesse was kind of mentioning was, like diversity of background and experience. Like, I think we talk about like specific types of diversity, like, oh, I'm a woman, or I'm Black, or, accessibility, or I'm disabled, right? But I think it's just like, it all boils down to like diversity of background and experience. Like, I think we were talking about this on IG Live the other day, Jocelyn, right? Like, where like not everyone can like go and like get a 4-year degree in computer science. I like, what if I have children, or like, what if I have dependents, and all of that. And so like really building out pathways for people who have different experiences to be in tech. So like apprenticeship programs, I think, are really big, right? Because, people can graduate from boot camp, and like, because they didn't go to like 4-year degree, like college, right? They sometimes are seen like they're like less experienced. But I think if you like really invest in mentorship, right? Like that empowerment piece, invest in educating people, and like filling in the gaps, like then it really levels out the playing field for people who have different experiences, who don't come from like similar income backgrounds as everyone else. So yeah, I would say like I really like the apprenticeship piece of things. I think that it's going to be a really big game changer. And I know like I think Shopify does one for product management. There's tons, but I would like to see more.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Being able to learning something and being able to kind of put it into practice, right? And to feel comfortable actually doing something in that environment is key. And so when you have people who, are trying to enter a career from different backgrounds, it's extremely important to have opportunities where, somebody who doesn't necessarily, have everything figured out, or doesn't come from the exact same background as someone else, to have opportunities where they can get in there and learn and be just as successful. So definitely agree with you there for sure. We've talked a lot about what we want to see different, or what we want to see change in 2022. But let's talk about what we already enjoy or love about the tech industry. Chloe, I'll start with you. What is it about the tech industry that you think, anyone who's kind of on the fence or thinking about moving into this space, what are those things that really stand out to you as kind of the benefits of working in tech?
I mean, I sort of touched on it briefly before, but I think that for me, the greatest benefit is, as a product designer, I'm in a position to help people achieve their dreams. And whether that's helping to develop a product, building an interface, or just building them a freaking website for their, small business, it's like, that is so deeply rewarding to me, to be able to help people achieve their own dreams. And sort of in connection with my passion for accessibility, it's like, then I get to educate all of my clients about why they should, use alt text and prepare for screen readers and do these things. And then I think makes people more aware of, sort of the social model of disability, which I won't get into now because this is not what this is about. But
we'll have to schedule more time with you to get really
that's a whole conversation. But I think it makes people more conscientious of how choices that they didn't think mattered actually matter to a lot of people. And so that's what I find most rewarding, is like helping people realize their dreams, but also helping people grow and understand that there is more that they need to be cognizant of.
Yeah, I love that. And then Jesse, I know you touched a little bit on kind of the flexibility and, that a job in tech and specifically working remotely can bring. What is it that you love about working in this space?
I think it's the flexibility in your career path. So going back again to like when I graduated college and I was thinking about getting a master's in art, I was a little hesitant because I was worried that I would go down a path that I couldn't really get off of. Like if I have a certain qualification and I do a certain job for a certain amount of time, then that's all people would want to like hire me for, which isn't necessarily true. And you can honestly always learn something new obviously at any age. But that was kind of my hesitation. And with tech, like I feel like a lot of people just say tech and they think of like maybe coding or like very specific roles. And one thing that's cool is there's always new positions. Like it's just always evolving. Like that's just the nature of technology. And like even at my job, I'm an intern, a developer intern. So my job is like coding. And I got hired as a backend engineer. But you get a mentor when you start as an intern there. And even, she was like, I know you're a backend engineer, but if you're interested in learning React or more front end tools as well, like you totally can. And then even beyond that, if you like, let's say you're an engineer and at some point you're interested in like product management or you're interested in UX, like there are opportunities where you can learn those things. And like, it's not like, well, you got hired to do this and like, you need to do this for the rest of your career. So yeah, I feel like that just makes it really exciting. And especially for people like me who are super indecisive. And like, again, I just got really scared of being like pigeonholed. It's just really cool how you like, you really like, I have no idea what my job title would be in like 5 years or 10 years. Like I can really, I've worked so hard to get to a specific place, but from here I can go in so many different directions.
I love that. I resonate with that myself, of that kind of feeling or that anxiety of, if I take this step or, if this becomes my career, certain industries or certain roles that you can, go for, they do sometimes have that effect, right? Where you can feel like, okay, well, this is the path I'm on. Can't really get off the train. It goes from this step to this step. So yeah, I think that can be appealing to a lot of people, that idea of when you're in a space where you can kind of build your own career and where you can get certain skill sets that are important, will always be important. And so as time goes by, things evolve, like you said, but also you can apply those skills to different areas, right? So each of you ladies work in tech in some way, but all in very different areas and have different focuses. So I think that's extremely important. Thank you for pointing that out, because as you're looking to, or anyone watching looking at potentially going into a career in tech, that's kind of the things that go through your mind of like, well, what does that mean? Does that mean I'm just going to be sitting at a computer and coding all day? It's like, no, it can mean so many things. Chloe's designing things, and there's just so many different like subsets of what tech is, right? Tech is just an umbrella, but we need to definitely continue to have these conversations to talk about the different spaces that tech can even be applied to, right? And Allie, this kind of ties into what you were saying earlier about you having that kind of medical background. And so now you are specifically recruiting in tech for a medical company, right? So kind of applying these skill sets to these different industries, it all, there's almost limitless possibilities here, right? Awesome. And then Allie, same question to you. What is it that you specifically love about working in this industry?
Yeah, I want to, plus one everything that Chloe and Jesse said. And I think with that flexibility and that ability to help people really also comes like a huge opportunity for impact. And I think that's what it is for me. Like I remember when I spoke earlier about like the applications of tech in like the healthcare field, it was really from an angle. So I was in a what was it, a genomics course, right? So like that was my senior year course, like capstone course that I took in my bio degree, and we were learning about kind of the ethics of it all, and how like a lot of the research wasn't being done on people of like African descent, and we were learning about how all of this would impact healthcare in the future. And I'm like, okay, well, like even if I go on and like I become a doctor and I make all this money and like all of this stuff, and I have the money to even afford this, like wow, I can't even access it just because I'm Black. And so that was kind of really the deciding factor for me, where I was like, all right, well then maybe I just need to like get into tech and like get into biotech somehow, and then like build my own lab and like do all of these things. And it was like obviously like very big dreams that I haven't achieved yet, but I think it's always been about like social justice for me, and like getting into tech. I feel like the tech industry is very much like a great equalizer, right? Like there's so much opportunity, and there's such a lowered barrier of like learning in the tech space that like it's really allowed there to be like social mobility, right, for like people who haven't had those opportunities in the past. And it's been really interesting how like I started my career in 2018, and it's just the beginning of 2022, and like these like short 3-4 years, like I've been able to like have some of that social impact through the work that I do. And so I think like the tech industry is a great driver of like impact and social change, and I think that's what I love about being a part of this space, because I get to be a part of that. I get to impact not just my life and like change my career and like the effects and implications of that, but I change other people's careers around me, right? There's people in Baddies in Tech who have started new careers and have like changed their lives, and then I get to change potentially like communities and nations and all of that. And so yeah, that's what I love about it, because I don't think I'd be able to do that anywhere else.
I love how this conversation has become so much about the bigger picture, right? And just about kind of, being able to have an impact on the world. But I think that that's something that is so appealing about this space, is that there's kind of this idea of the sky's the limit, when you're a part of the, when you have a career in tech, right? By just nature of being in tech, you're going to be on the forefront of things that are new and what's happening. And that in and of itself becomes a vessel for you to bring about change in the world, no matter which industry or space that you apply it to. So love it. We are going to have time.
Could I add something to that real quick?
Of course.
Another thing that I kind of, Allie touched on a little bit too, is like, you can really take your background. Like tech can be so many things. Like obviously every industry uses tech in some way. So I think for people who are thinking about getting into tech, and maybe you're coming from hospitality or healthcare or art or whatever it is, like even if you were changing your role in your career, like you could still be working in that industry. So like as somebody who is an artist still, thinking about like the times when I like was trying to sell art, or even being an entrepreneur with like freelancing as doing coding, like now I'm working for a company where I'm like at the higher, like the bigger picture is like building this tool that can help like millions of people also achieve their goal. So yeah, that's what's really cool. It doesn't always have to feel like a total like industry or career change. Like you might be doing something different, but you can always find a role that still relates to like what you're interested in or like what you love at your core.
Yeah. And on that same note, I'll also say, we look at Chloe, for example, that, she's a product designer, and she, does things with with design, right? And that's still a part of this tech industry. I think, a lot of people, and we get the question all the time with having a course in product design, people don't quite get what that is. And they don't even connect the dots that that's a part of tech, right? And that there's, opportunities in tech, like you said, Jesse, that touch almost every other industry. So yeah, I love that. Beautifully said.
Can I add to that? So
Yeah.
actually, I don't like to think of tech as an industry. I call it like a revolution. So like similar to like the industrial revolution, right? It's just like literally like on top of all other industries. It's like if you were like back then in like the 19 whatevers, right? And like you did things manually, like all of a sudden you're doing things with machines. It's the same way with tech. It's like, yeah, like in the past we weren't online and like we maybe sold from like brick and mortar stores. And now Shopify allows us to sell like digitally and like you just have to get with the program. And so it's more so just like a shift in like industry and like the way we do things. And so that's why it does apply across the board into like all other industries. It's not an industry really, because it's like, unless you're building like the hardware, I guess, like I wouldn't really say that tech is an industry. It's really just like a way of doing work in the 21st century. So yeah.
I absolutely love
Yeah,
that.
that's great.
You said tech is a revolution. I'm stealing that. I'm using that somewhere. That's it. Yes.
Yeah.
All right. We do want to have some time for the attendees to ask questions. So I'm going to ask one final question from each of you. So for that person that's listening and on the fence and isn't sure if, within their New Year's resolutions, if, pursuing a new career is the right path for them, what is the advice that you would give them, just for anyone who's just considering it and right now just not sure of what next steps to take or if it's even the right path for them? And we'll start with you, Chloe.
Okay. I think that in being on this call, many people have already made their first step and at least trying to understand more. And I think that that is extremely important to acknowledge. And there's a lot of value in knowing what's good for you. There's value in knowing what isn't good for you. So whether this inspires people to enroll or makes people think like maybe not, I respect their decision because we've got to do what's best for us. Let's be real, it's 2022. We've spent the last like 2 years and however many other years under capitalism, like just working to work. But I do love working in this industry because I think that there are so many, because tech as an industry, and also love the concept of not referring to tech as an industry, but a revolution. There are so many places that people like of all sorts of marginalized communities are left out in the process of designing and implementing the things that we use every day. Like, not gonna dog on Zoom, but Zoom has some accessibility issues. They've also done some things great. But the more voices with more experience that we have in the room, the more diverse backgrounds, the different lived experiences, the things that matter to all of us individually as people, that's what's going to create a greater revolution in tech. Because it, like, I'm a white woman, like I'm extremely well educated, and it's like, so, but like my voice isn't the most important voice in this conversation, and it never will be. And I think that the reason that people, if you're hesitant to go into tech because you're afraid of it being, a boys club, like an all white male kind of gross situation, it can be that sometimes. But that's why we need more voices in the room of more people who have had different lived experiences, who are not going to put up with the stuff. It's like, I think I can't curse here, so insert various choice obscenities.
Yes. I love it.
Put up with stuff and the marginalization that has sort of been endemic to the tech industry for a very long time. So it's like, yes, if you are a person with a disability, if you are queer, if you are a person of color, if you are a woman, if you're non-binary, like all of these things, like come on in, we need you. If you want to be here, we need you.
I love
Because
that.
we are trying to create some of us, I'm trying to create a world, a digital world where everyone is included and has access to information. And so
I love that.
come on in. We
Yeah.
want it.
If you want to be here, we need you here.
Yes.
I love that.
100%.
Put that on a coffee mug. Love that. Okay, and then Jesse, what do you think?
Like, well, kind of tying into what she just said about like if you want to be here, I feel like my advice would kind of be two things. One is like, don't be afraid to change your path, even like within your path to tech, and then also like be real with yourself. So like, I know when I started learning how to code and I would be watching a lot of YouTube videos, I kept seeing those ads, like someone standing there in front of a chalkboard being like, you have to learn how to code. And there's just like a lot of messaging that was almost like harassing you into learning how to code. And I'm not one of those people who is like, yeah, you should do this, because it's really not for everyone. And I think that's something too that's cool about like Flatiron is there's so many different programs, and it's not like, well, this is for everybody and like you have to do this. It's like maybe you go down one path. I know somebody who like started, it was a different boot camp, but they started doing data science, and it got to a point where they're just like, this isn't what I want to do. You know, and sometimes you get halfway down the path and then you're like, you feel guilty for like backing up and being like, oh, I don't want to give up on myself. But sometimes it's really not what you enjoy doing. And now they're going down the path of like product design and UX. So even within tech, like I guess another example is like my first like that coding meetup that I went to, I was learning Java. And then at the end, I was just like, I don't know what I just learned. Like for like a year, I'm like, what? But there was still part of me that was like, I think that coding is what I want to do, and I think that's what I like. But maybe that language wasn't really the one that's gonna like get me started. And that's when I kind of, I mean, you're not even really taking a step back, but I just kind of changed direction, and I'm like, maybe I'll just start again in a new boot camp. And that's when I found Flatiron. So it's definitely like, don't ever feel like, well, I've already kind of gone this far down a path, like I can't start over again. A lot of times you're not really just starting over, but yeah. And then the same with like when I started freelancing, there was a moment when I had to be real with myself and be like, the idea of like working for myself and being an entrepreneur sounded really cool. But I got to a point where I'm like, yeah, this isn't what's working. And then I kind of changed paths. So
I love that. Everybody's path is going to be different. And we can't be afraid to, like you said, feel like we've gone too far into something or it's too late to pivot. As you are figuring out what you want your career to be, you have to have that flexibility and give yourself that grace to say, you know what, I'm not going to just say, this is the thing I'm going to do, and it works out every time. Sometimes it takes the journey to get there. I love that. And then Allie, any advice for anyone considering a career in tech?
Absolutely. So I coach a lot of like people trying to get into tech. And what I tell them all the time is to like really look at your background. Like you never don't have like any experience, right? And like I think even looking back at this conversation and like Chloe's story and Jesse's story, right? Like Chloe, she has like a design background and now she's doing product design. And like Jesse, like even what you mentioned about like working specifically at Shopify and how like you were an entrepreneur in the past, like I'm sure I can like 99 like 0.9% sure guess that when you were in your interviews for your internship with Shopify, you spoke about that. And that's one of the reasons why they would choose you, because like it connects, right? And so like I really advise people to always like look at their background, look at your personality. What do you enjoy? What do you love? What have you done in school? And like just like take like many steps. Like sometimes it's not about like just like going to learn like this whole new skill. Like sometimes it's like, yeah, like you might like add a new skill, but sometimes it's also like, you know, what have I done and how does that apply to the tech industry? Because like we said, it's like so vast. There's so many different things that like you can do. That like sometimes your skills currently can apply, like, and you can just like update your resume and get a new job. And then there's other times where like, you want to be a developer, like, you want to, do product design and you don't have those skills. But like, when you know that, like join a Flatiron School, right? And stick to the path. But I think again, like you might then go into like product design at like a healthcare company because you worked in healthcare in the past, right? Like just find something to connect, right? Because people hire people when people hire people for their stories. And so like that's like a really important thing to think about when you're thinking about transitioning into tech. I think that, yeah, that's my main tip. Like honestly, it works every time.
I love that. Oh, I love that. What a perfect way to like wrap everything up of, just like you said, it's your story, and that's what's really going to help you to land that job, no matter what it is really telling that story. And it's so funny that you said that you were 99% sure about that, Jesse having that and utilizing that as, a way to talk to a company to say, hey, I'm the perfect match here. Because Jesse and I have talked about that before. Yeah, she's got a podcast episode coming out. For anyone watching, Flatiron School has Tech Perspective podcast. Definitely tune it in. We're on all the streaming places and YouTube. But with that, we did talk about that a bit, and how, having that in her background and being able to tell that story, like you said, is important. And again, yeah, somebody just asked the podcast name, Tech Perspective Podcast. And if you go on our YouTube account for Flatiron School, you'll see we've got the video versions up. But also you can find us on all the streaming places, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of it. Cool. Well, I think that's all the questions I had, and we can kind of transition into a Q&A segment. So any questions that people have had, go ahead and take a moment. If you've got questions, drop them into the Q&A function. I see some people putting things in the chat, which is fine. We can try to pull from there as well, but it makes it easier if it's all in one place. And then we'll just kind of pull some questions from there. All right, so first question is for Allie. Do you have a website for your startup or any social media links?
Yes, absolutely. So I will drop the website, but it's just baddiesintech.com. We're actually doing a website upgrade, and it's going to be all new and shiny in February. So look out for that, but you can definitely go check it out now. And then we're at Baddies in Tech on all platforms, social, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter are our main ones. So yeah, check us out, join the community, sign up for a free membership or a founding membership. If you sign up for a founding membership, we're going to join our Discord. If you sign up for a free membership, you'll start getting our newsletters with like resources and opportunities and all that fun stuff. So definitely join Baddies in Tech. We have a lot of fun.
Love it. Next question is for Chloe. Do you feel you needed, or if it helped, to have graphic design as your background?
Personally, I do think that working as a product designer, that I benefited a lot from having a graphic design background, but that is 100% not a prerequisite. The people that I went to my boot camp with in Australia, we had a high school math teacher, a mechanic. We had some people that had done web design, but not aesthetically, like they were more like coding based. We had a fashion designer, we had artists. There were so many different people. There were also like, there were a number of like business analysts and like people who had absolutely no visual background whatsoever. And I did that program in 2016 because I was the only American, and they asked me a lot about why Donald Trump was going to be elected president. So I can remember that date quite quickly. But the people who came from more of an analytical background are doing just as well in their professional space as those of us who came from any sort of design background. It's just that in the realm of product design, there are so many pieces. It's not like you can do product design in this very like sort of UI focused, or you can be a product designer that is very much focused on doing user research, or you can be somewhere in the middle, which is where I like to live my life. So I don't think it's a hindrance to not have some sort of visual design background, whether that's fashion, interiors, all of that, because there's so many spaces within product development and product design that there's space for lots and lots and lots of people to come in and bring their own expertise, which is truly the most important part, is bringing what you know.
Yeah, and Chloe, isn't there even like on like the UX research, you like that kind of stuff, like UX design type stuff that like you don't even really like do, like there's no like visual design aspect for
You
real.
don't got to make anything pretty. You
Right.
just have to be able to talk to people.
Exactly.
Yeah, UX research is a totally different beast, which I imagine that Flatiron covers all of that within their course, because all of that is product design. You need to be able to understand how to talk to people and get their stories and learn from them and learn what they need. And aesthetics only come into play if aesthetics are your jam. There's so many, especially in product design, I feel like there's so much space for so many people with so many backgrounds. So
I know like psychology, even I know a lot of people who study psychology in school and then find their way to UX design.
Mm-hmm.
It would be really helpful.
100%.
All about kind of getting into the mind of, like you said, Chloe, of being able to communicate to people, right, or figure out what resonates with people is important. So a lot of different kind of skill sets are needed in that space. Somebody asked, is age a limiting factor in getting into tech, coming from an 18-year-old? I'll kind of kick this off by saying that, you know, we have a lot of students that come through of all ages, and again, of so many different backgrounds. We've had one of our alum is 19 and her name is Andrea, and she's shown up on our social media sometimes because she's always talking about, she decided to take our boot camp course for software engineering. And by the time it was all said and done, she was only 19 and was able to get the skills that she needed to move into a tech role that, you know, when she talks about it online and on her channels, a lot of people like don't believe her. They're like, you're only 19. How are you doing these things? So I would say, you know, again, it's one of these things. It really depends on the person. You know, we've got people that have already been established in their career for years and decide they want to switch careers, and they end up asking us, am I too old? And of course, that answer is no as well. this is again one of those things. This is why I like how we had the conversation of, working in tech can be a layer to certain things, right? So you can start off that way. You can say, hey, I'm young, I'm 18. This is what I want to do. Let me go ahead and start this path now. But also later on down the line, if you're somebody who's already invested your time in learning into other industries, there's still space for you to continue to learn these things and to apply it where it fits. Next question would be about imposter syndrome. So this person says, have you dealt with feeling behind others or that you had a late start to your career? Let's kind of go around the room. Does anybody have anything to add to this? I see, Jesse, you kind of raise your hand.
Yeah, I think I've had the same question like throughout this whole time of me like thinking about getting into tech. And everybody, whether they've been a developer engineer for like 5 years or 10 years or whatever, everybody always tells me that it doesn't actually go away. And now in my new role at Shopify, I even like meeting everybody on my team, some people are senior developers, staff developers, which is even like the step above senior. They are like, well, there's always somebody that knows more about something than you, like in some way, like in some factor of your job. Like you're never gonna be the person who knows the most about everything. So that's really important to remember. And yeah, I like starting late. So at a company like Shopify, I think it really depends on the company, obviously. A company like Shopify, in my intern cohort, so I'm 27 and I was kind of like, oh, am I going to be like the oldest one in here? Like, is it going to be a bunch of like university students? Am I going to fit in? And I mean, I don't know everybody's age, but the range of people and their experience, like Shopify hires a lot of people that have had who are career changers, or some people are still in school. Some people are just here for a semester and then they go back to school. So like it's hard because, you want to feel like, oh, maybe one day I'll get over this and I won't ever worry about it again. But you might get put on a new project and you're kind of back at that junior level all over again, where you're like, oh, I don't actually know anything about this specific project. So I'm still working on trying to figure out like how to have that confidence. I think the environment can really help. So, it's hard to know how a company is going to be before you start. But that's another thing when you're first starting out, your first job, you don't have to stay there for like 5-10 years. If it's a company that you don't feel like is making you feel confident or making you feel like you have that room to like have imposter syndrome, then you can always leave. Like you can always move around and find that good like culture fit.
I think for me, it's really just reframing like what failure is, and like, right, like knowing that, even if I don't know this thing, like that doesn't mean that I've failed. It's like, it's really only failure if I quit. So so I think like I have made a lot of mistakes, and like I've learned a lot on the way. And I've gotten used to like not knowing and like figuring it out on the way, and like falling and having to get back up. And I think especially when like you're learning in public or like you have a platform and things like that, it can feel very much like, everyone's laughing at you, or like you're failing.
I was land a job at 19.
In like a spotlight. But I think everyone who's like made something of themselves has had to fail at it, like, and they've had so many of those experiences. And so like, yeah, anyone worth like their salt, right, like knows that feeling, and also like would not like laugh at you for failing. And like, I think going back to Jesse's point of like being in an environment that really encourages that, like at ZocDoc, one of our 6 core values is like learners before masters. And so like, it's really important that like, you fail at stuff and you try stuff, and like, you don't kind of like get in this analysis paralysis wavelength of thought, right? Like just kind of like do what you think is right and almost like explain yourself later. Like there's a saying around that. I forget what it is, but like asking for forgiveness before you ask for permission. Like be your own, like believe in yourself first. And I know like that just kind of sounds like, oh, like believe in yourself, but like I think people notice like effort over, like you failed. Like no one's gonna be like, wow, like why did you try? And like why didn't you like, and I think also like being in the tech industry and like kind of growing, you also need to know like when to ask for help and also like when to try things out on your own. But I think that's that balance of like, all right, like I trust myself and then I also trust the people around me. I don't know if that helped, but those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. That's great advice. All right, let's see. Another question here. So the question says, would you recommend for any field in tech learning coding? Does this help or make applications stand out? So obviously, Jesse, you know how to code, but Allie, Chloe, okay, yeah, Chloe, go for it.
I mean, I only know how to code basic stuff. I can
Right.
do obviously like HTML, CSS, like Java, very, very basic. I always wanted to like dip my toe in a little bit more, but then I remember that like I have a job and I got stuff to do. But there is definitely an advantage to being able to at least understand very, very, very basic coding, especially if you're coming in as a visual person. So if you're coming in as a graphic designer or product designer, having at least a little bit of knowledge of various coding languages, that is a huge value add to a lot of employers. Even if you're like, yeah, I mean, I don't really know how to do this, but like I can do a little bit of it. So, and part of that is like you seem like kind of less of a fool when you're talking to your devs. You're like, well, I can do like some basic stuff,
Yeah.
It's like you're talking to your front end devs and they're like, okay, well, at least, you tried. I do think that there's value in having at least a little bit of coding knowledge.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, to just kind of echo that, I think it's really going to depend on what you're going into. So just like Chloe said, like if you have to communicate with developers and you're somebody who's more visually focused, it doesn't hurt to have that, at least a basic understanding. And I think, that can be applied to other positions in tech as well, where you don't necessarily have to know, how to, code something from start to finish. But, in some cases, having that background does definitely help. Allie, I know you, of course, mentor and talk to a lot of people who enter into a variety of different roles. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I think it really depends. And I think what Chloe said about like your closeness to the people who code is important. Like, I think everyone should have a basic understanding of like how the internet works. Like, what is the internet? Like, there's actually a course like how the internet works or something like that. Like, I would recommend everyone take that and understand that. Like, there's a question, is there a specific language you would recommend for general coding? Like, the internet is built on HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, right? So like those are the things that like you should understand, not necessarily like I've done like coding with HTML, CSS, like I can build a basic web page, but it's not like I can ever deploy that to like like AWS, like I can't do that and I don't need to do those things. I need to, like as a technical recruiter, I need to understand what AWS is or what Java is or what like front end JavaScript frameworks are and like what they're used for. So I can talk to developers and I can understand, does this developer know what they're talking about? Or like, have they actually used this? But like, I don't need to ever know how to code myself. So it really depends on what you're going to do. I would say just having an understanding of the internet and like what code is like, what code does and what it's used for is important, just to understand the industry that you're working with and like what software is doing in the background. But if you're a designer, you know, I think what Chloe said about like I remember in like my MEST program, there were a lot of times where like the designers would design something like outrageous, and then the developers would be like, well, you don't understand that it's really hard to implement this in actual code. So I think like in those situations, it's like just important to like have dabbled in it, but I wouldn't like say like your end goal was like to become a product designer. I wouldn't also pay for like a software engineering boot camp. Like, you know, like I might take a free course on Udemy to understand it. So I just think it depends on, you know, what you're going to do. And there's roles that like you don't need to code at all. Maybe it's like tech sale. Well, sometimes it really depends. It really, really depends. But I wouldn't say it's a prerequisite for anything. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. We'll do one more question. Let's see. Looks like a couple just came through. Or maybe those were just comments. Let's see. This one is another one specific to product design, Chloe. What are some disadvantages? So disadvantages of remote learning for product design.
So I haven't actually done I haven't done any sort of like education or advocacy in the remote learning space. But one of your greatest advantages in doing product design and prototyping and development is breaking stuff. Gosh, I'm realizing how much I swear because I'm trying really hard not to swear on this. Like
Stuff.
Essentially, as a product designer, all you want to do is break stuff. You want to figure out where all of the weaknesses are in your system, whether you're designing a website or an app or like any sort of interface. You really need to like get in there and have, technically what you need is you need someone who's not familiar with the system to get in there and tell them to break it. And that can be done remotely, but being able to like actually watch someone navigate a system is, I mean, we have all sorts of like, we have eye tracking and, you know, mouse tracking and things like that, but like, it's not the same as being able to just sit and observe someone while they're going through your interface and hearing the hesitation in their voice and all these things. It's like, I've tried to do it a few times over Zoom and it's like, it's not as conducive because a lot of, you can't really sit there and like, be like, okay, well, like, why did you pause there? What's going on? What's your frame of reference here? What's confusing you? Because it's like, you're seeing like a, you know, delayed response on their screen of what they're looking at. And they're trying to navigate a system, and it just, I would say that like user testing is really the thing that is suffering the most during not being able to be in person with test subjects, because you just get to learn so much more when you're in a situation where you're talking to another human being and you've gotten to like do a little chit chat and getting to know them, and it feels like a much more safe and comfortable space for them to share what they're learning and what their difficulties are.
Makes sense. Okay, and then this person just, I'll answer this. They said specifically for a boot camp, so I guess the disadvantages there with learning, you know, remotely. What I'd say to that is obviously everybody learns differently, and everybody's going to have, you know, a different way that they learn. That's why with Flatiron School, we have so many different options, right? So typically, or before the pandemic, we were able to have in-person courses as well as online courses, but obviously we have to do what's safe for everyone. And so, as things become safe, we'll always, push to be able to have those options available so that you can weigh kind of the pros and the cons of the type of learning style that you have. But what I will say is that our team and the curriculum that's been built, they've done a really great job of making sure that they take these things into account. So we actually launched our product design course while the world was on pause. So you can definitely, believe it that with everything, even some of those limitations that you may experience, specifically in a product design environment, those things have definitely been accounted for in the curriculum that's been laid out. So definitely a great question. And I definitely encourage you to take a look at our website, go through and see, kind of the differences between, learning live or full-time versus having a flexible schedule and those sorts of things to really get an idea of the type of learner that you are, if you think that, learning remotely or online would be something that may, hinder you in the process. But all great questions. Thank you everyone who asked questions. I think we are at time.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for everyone that came out tonight, all of our panelists. As a reminder, you're going to receive a copy of tonight's presentation within about 3 business days after the event. And if you'd like to see any previous events, go ahead and head to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Thank you guys and have an amazing night.
Bye everyone.
Bye everyone.